I think let's get started now. Thank you all so much for being here. This is exciting. It's great to see some familiar faces from last week and some new faces too. Thank you all for being here with us. So tonight our presentation is going to be about grant sleuthing. How do you uncover funding opportunities for your small business or for your nonprofit? So we're gonna do some quick introductions first. Angela, do you wanna start?
So that's me. I'm Angela Silva, Dr. Angela Silva. I only use that when I need to have an extra few things in front of my name. But yes, I have worked in the nonprofit sector for about 25 years as a volunteer and outreach organizer with the Sierra Club. You know how that goes, right? Save the world. And then also with the Geneva Foundation. So I spent about 6 years supporting military medical research worldwide. And then also 10 years at Multicare Health System, running their grants office. And that's a community-based hospital, so peds to adults. If somebody wanted to get money for something, they came across my desk. And so for CPIN, I'm super excited to be here under Collaborative Partners Initiative. We are celebrating our 4th year in business this month. So Ariana here is our lead senior grant and RFP writer, and so we're here to kind of give you our knowledge of what we've learned over the years and help position you for funding. So I'm glad you're here. Ariana.
Thanks, Angela. Yes, as Angela said, I'm Ariana Garfolo. I'm the senior grant writer here at Collaborative Partners Initiative, and I've got about 3 to 4 years of grant writing experience, about a year and a half here with CPIN, as well as about 10 years of experience in the educational world. So I'm excited to chat with you all tonight. So before we get started, we want to know a bit about all of you. So I tried to make this a little easier this week. If you were here last week, there was a number you typed in. This week there's a QR code. So if you have your phone, you can scan the QR code that is on the sheet on your table. Just open your camera. And even if you did this last week, we would still appreciate if you do it again, because this is good for us to have this data to know about who is here. So if you just scan that code, every table should have one. If you don't have a copy, let us know. We can bring another one around. And I also just want to say thank you to the Economic Development Department at Federal Way. They're sponsoring these workshops, so thank you to Economic Development for having us here.
We'll take a few minutes for you guys to find your phones or log in or type that code in, so thank you.
Okay, so it looks like we've got 7 nonprofits, 2 small businesses so far. Last week we had more small businesses than nonprofits, so this week the tables have turned. Got 1 government. I'll give you all a few more moments.
And while you're filling that out, I will give you a tidbit that's probably not in our slides. So there's grants for every type of organization out there. And so we love to know who's in the room to kind of shape our conversation with the audience. So if you're a nonprofit, there's more grants out there for you. Yay! There's also more nonprofits. Boo! I mean, yay, right? So it's super competitive. So most folks want to provide charitable funding, and if you're a nonprofit, you're going to have a lot of options. But depending on the work you're going to do, it's going to be super competitive. So what if you're a small business? So small businesses get grants as well. They may get them from the Small Business Association or some other entity. But small businesses tend to also be more competitive for what we call procurements or solicitations. So as a small business, you're selling services or products, right? And so that gives you a chance to probably get some support in that way. Governments, local government, we're here in Federal Way, right? So they're also eligible for grants, and you might be another type of organization. They're probably also eligible for grants if you responded other. So it depends on your entity type. So one hint that's not in these slides, and that's why you're here in the room, is when you're looking at grants, make sure you're an eligible entity to apply for that grant. Don't just look at what the grant funds, but look at who the grant funds, what type of entity. Okay.
Thanks, Angela. So thank you all for responding to this. I think we can go to the next one. So we're also curious about how many grants folks in the room have applied for. So have you done none, 1 to 5, 5 to 10? Yes, so this question was, if you applied for grants during COVID, should we still count them? I say yes, because yeah, they were a specific type of grant, but all grants are different, but also have some similarities. So I think you can count those. So we've got 1, 5 to 10, couple folks 1 to 5, and quite a few none. So that's super exciting. We're excited to help some folks hopefully find your first grant. All right, so one more, we just want to know a bit about you and what your role at your organization is. So essentially, what is your job or what is your job title? You can just type in whatever it is and that'll appear here on the screen. All right, this is exciting. So we've got all kinds of different folks here. We've got board members, coordinators, procurement, president and CEO, owner, volunteer, board of directors, facilitator, trainer. Amazing. Well, thank you all for sharing that. It's great to know a bit more about who we've got in the room here with us. So I think that'll do for our questions for you. So our theme for the presentation today is that looking for grants is a treasure hunt. So we hope this is a bit of a relatable analogy that can help us have some fun with something that could possibly seem stressful. So we're gonna try to think about grant sleuthing as a treasure hunt, and the prize is finding some money for your organization. So we have a couple of sections. Our first is going to be treasure maps. So this is, where do you look to find grants? That's going to be your treasure map. Also decoding the clues. So we'll talk a bit about eligibility criteria, as Angela started mentioning, and different requirements for grants. We'll also talk about X marks the spot. So how do you successfully identify which grant is right for your organization? And there will be time for questions after this, but if anyone has a question as we're going along, please feel free to raise your hand. We are going to try to pass around a mic if you're asking a question. It would be for recording purposes, and we just want to be able to capture that question. So if you're comfortable with doing that. So the first thing that I want to talk about before we even get into where to look for grants is to tell you folks a bit about the fact that you may need to apply for quite a few grants. So you're not going to get every grant that you apply for, and that's okay. It's good to set expectations and know what the landscape looks like. So this is a really neat survey that is done every year by this organization called the Grant Professionals Association, and they survey many different people who are in the grant writing profession to find out what the landscape looks like in reality. So they surveyed about 4,000 people. They found that if organizations submitted 3 to 5 grant applications, 90% got at least one. So that's not too bad. For every 3 to 5 grants, most organizations are going to get one. If you submit 6 to 11 grants, 98% of organizations got one. So that's exciting. And then almost 100% of organizations that submit 11 or more grants get at least one. So hopefully that is a bit encouraging to know that if you apply for several, it is likely that you'll get one, but also to set that realistic expectation of you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket and just apply for one grant and assume that you're going to get it, because you may need to apply for a few before you get there. So this is a question that I'll throw out to you as the audience. I know most of you are newer to looking for grants, but if there's anybody who has applied for grants in the past, does anybody want to share any challenges that maybe they faced when they were looking for grant opportunities?
So I've been told in the past that as a small business, it's best to partner with a nonprofit. And my biggest hurdle has been I can get the nonprofits excited, but it's them finding the time to actually work and find the grant and actually have it happen.
Yeah, I think that having partnerships can be a huge benefit, but like you said, also a challenge, because then you're wrangling multiple entities to get everyone to work together Do you have any advice for this, Angela?
Depending on who you're asking for money, I mean, you might be able to go and get a grant yourself, right? And so, and grants are different flavors. So as you think of grants, think of like whether you celebrate Thanksgiving or your best dinner, like think of all the options, right? I'm a buffet girl. So you can take me to Vegas and I'm like, ooh, how many things can I eat? But I'm one person, right? So the same thing with grants, you want to have options. And so just as an example, because you help women get stronger, so you can write a grant to say, a lot of women in our neighborhood can't afford our membership. So if you can give us, $5,000, that will help us serve 50 extra women. And these are the types of women we want to serve. Women maybe that have they're a little more shy, right? Or maybe they have higher chronic disease, or they don't usually go to the gym, or etc. And the reason that Curves is a cool place to go because it's for women. And women have a sense of belonging and a sense of community when they go to the gym together. And we do not discriminate, and we want to open our doors to all the women in the neighborhood that can get here. Now, some women can't get here. Maybe we want a grant for transportation, right? And maybe we want a grant for bringing in more events that aren't, related to exercise. Maybe we want a grant to help childcare because women and families, we have limited time and we need to take care of ourselves. So we want a grant for self-care, right? So it depends on what you're asking for and who wants to fund that to help increase well-being for women. And the nonprofits you work with, you could have a great program. Maybe you're trying to get some of their folks into your services. Now, the other thing you can do is work with nonprofits or businesses and sell services. So this isn't a grant, but this is how do you increase workplace wellness? Well, we'll do that for you for $49 a staff person a month, right? Let's get together and do that. So I feel like that could be a really fun ask depending on how you approach the question, right? So anyways, I'm excited. But that's the way you tell your story to a funder, and the best way to get a grant, which will be a future workshop, is alignment with what the funder wants to fund, right? Okay. Other questions? Yes.
My problem is finding people that are actually grant writers. I've interviewed, taken to lunch, spent hours with people, and they kind of like a month later, they like, oh, well, I think I'm too busy or whatever the case may be, and I've had somebody take a stab at one grant and it's, you have to have somebody that knows what they're doing. And it just doesn't seem to work for the people that are regular grant writers. And it's not like I have something hard that I'm having them do. I mean, hard as in saying, I don't have any information for you. I've got plenty of information. So, and I've talked to quite a few other nonprofits said the same thing, that, you identify somebody that's written a bunch of grants, but then you spend all this time with them and then they go, no. So we actually do diapers and adult incontinence products. We have a diaper bank, but before that we were doing large scale drives for 10 years and helping up to 25 nonprofits. So we do. We're diaper people.
We gotta go, right? So I think, that is a challenge because grant writers, to your point, Cheryl, aren't all created equal. And grant writing is a lot about storytelling. And depending on who you're telling the story to, how you write the grant and position the grant matters. And so there are some great resources for you to check out. But interview them like they were going to date your favorite person, right? Don't just give them a pass because they say they can write words. Communities Rise. Communities Rise is a nonprofit here in South King County. They do have workshops and provide resources to nonprofits, including grant writing, right? They have several workshops. Just check out their website, sign up, and say, please help me. The other organization you might want to check out is the Nonprofit Association of Washington. They should have a grant writer list. CPIN does that, but we're not here to sell services, but we do grant writing in all shapes, sizes, and flavors, so to speak. Puget Sound Grant Writers Association. So you can Google, Grant Writers Washington State, Grant Writers King County. That should lead you to their website and their profiles, and just skim their profiles. Like, would you want them to date your favorite person, right? And also look for keywords. Do they have experience writing for nonprofits, winning grants, etc.? So I would start there, and if that doesn't work, then let's talk. We can always dive deeper in resources. Now, there's also local colleges that have grant writing programs. I'm sure their students need a project. Ariana graduated from Spark the Fire grant writing and other courses, but they have freelance grant writers available that have gone through like a certain amount of training, right? So I would be curious on maybe when we come back to future workshops, Cheryl, if you found any grant writers, and if not, we can also give you some referrals.
I actually do grant writing part-time as well, so a contract by contract basis. I just want to say the biggest challenge that we have been facing, being a $61 million organization, nonprofit that focuses on mental health and substance use disorder, just trying to figure out post-COVID funding that's supposed to dry up in 2025, July 2025. So it's just trying to find more sustainability on programs and be able to have more access and create more visibility out there, and in strengthening partnerships. So it's always it's a give and take type of understanding in the world. And just this last summer, almost everything was dried up. There was not a lot of opportunities, and we just had to prepare for the new fiscal year. So understanding organizations' fiscal years is another one that I've been learning, is just when to go after the bigger grants and smaller grants, and just being able to tackle it. So
I think one thing I would say in response to that is that something that is a good practice to do is to diversify the way that you're getting funding. So not this next week, but the 3 workshops after that. I won't be teaching those, but there will be a fundraising professional here who will talk about other fundraising strategies. So that might be something for you to think about as well, for everyone to consider. Grants are one way of fundraising, but there are other ways as well, and you might want to combine some of those.
Yeah, and I think, grants in the time of COVID were almost like, please take the grant money and save the world, right? So there were less restrictions and the money was going out the door, and you were like, what? We can't use all this money. So there are funding cliffs, and to Ariana's point, we can talk about sustainability strategies, but the best way for anybody to get money is to ask for it. What we find for nonprofits is they don't ask enough. They give. If you have $1, you're going to give $1.50, right? And pretty soon you're going to run out of dollars. So what we need to do is work on donor strategies that overlay your grants, because grants are competitive and not guaranteed, and to see how we can build that. Just to put it in perspective while we go on to our next slide, the NFL football season, right? Nonprofit. How much money they got? Right? Just think about it. You're like, what? So like I said, nonprofits, we can kind of help you position some strategies, or even small businesses, of how to get money. Okay, and one more question.
My name is Jan Barber, and I'm a member of the Federal Way Lions Club. But I was working with the Tumwater Bluegrass Festival several years ago, and Olympia Brewing Company had always donated. And the year that we also asked DARE, which was called Dare to Keep Your Children Off Drugs, some of you might remember that. DARE they cut back on how they would fund us because beer wasn't their favorite thing to support. So we didn't expect, that was unexpected.
Like funder conflict of interest, right? But who doesn't like a little beer? Ginger beer. Okay, next slide.
Right. Yeah, thank you all so much for your questions. I think that now let's talk about where we're going to find all these amazing grants that we are preparing about. So we've got a couple of options. So there are grant databases for every budget. So the first thing I want to say to this is, in our world today, I know we're all really used to Googling things, to putting things into Google. Google is not the best solution for finding grants because you are not going to get as targeted of results. Some things aren't going to show up in Google at all, and it's going to take you a lot more time. What we would recommend would be using some sort of grant database, and there are lots of options. So instrumental is one. That is the higher budget option. I would say that one is more for if you have a large organization, if you're getting a lot of money, managing a lot of money, doing a lot of grants, that could be a good option. For mid-budget, there's one called Grant Station. If you do have a Grant Professionals Association membership, access for that one is free. And there's also the Foundation Directory online. But the one that I really want us to focus on is this one, which we're going to put in the spotlight. So this is called Grant Watch. We really recommend this one, especially for organizations that might be newer to receiving grants. This one is really pretty affordable. It's about $199 a year. So this Grant Watch is great because it includes all kinds of different grants. So there are all kinds of different funders that are going to make grants. So grants could come from foundations, from private foundations. They could come from the federal government. They could come from the state government. They could come from all kinds of different places. And so this database includes all of those. And there's a specific section of grants for small businesses. So there would be, right now, there's 1,263 grants as of putting the slide together that are specifically for small businesses. Now, of course, these probably aren't all going to work for your small business because some of them will be restricted by geography or by the type of funding it is or the projects that they want to fund. But I hope this is encouraging for those of you with small businesses. There really are grants that exist out there. You're in even better shape if you're a nonprofit. As you can see, there's 6,448 grants for nonprofits that are currently in this database. So this would give you access to all of those. And on this next slide here, I'll just show you briefly what it looks like. So you can put in what the recipient, so that would be small business or nonprofit, whatever your organization type is that would be receiving the grant. You can put in your location, so I've selected Washington here, and then category. If you clicked onto that, you would see that there are all kinds of categories. So there would be categories for children, for adults, for youth, for homelessness, for any number of causes that you could imagine. And so this is a much more efficient way to search than just by using Google, because you're going to be able to put in different keywords. After you click search grants, this works the way many sort of search engine tools might work, where you can do advanced search. You can put in multiple keywords or restrict the geography further if you want to put by county or city or whatever it might be. So this is really going to help you hone in on the kinds of grants that are available to you. So we want to spotlight this one as a good tool. Also, a lot of times your local library will have access to some grant databases. So if you are new to this, you don't want to pay right up front, you can try going to your library, and your librarian might also be able to help you. I see some questions over here.
So that is one of my big questions. I'm Michelle, and I'm associated with about 7 different nonprofits. At the First Avenue South Library, they have a dedicated grants computer, but nobody knows how to use it. And you have to reserve it ahead of time. But if nobody knows how to use it, it's sitting there at this great resource. Does anybody in this room know how to use it?
Yeah, I've used that database, and I actually did find a librarian who helped me pretty much. But you have to reserve it online. You have to go to King County Library System and reserve the grant. And I know it had the previous one, the FDO grant on database, and I think one or two others as well. So anyway.
Okay. Well, that's great to know. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, King County has a lot of resources. I believe there's a dedicated resource up towards Redmond as well. Just a thought on that. So it's not Google, right? It's a librarian. But oftentimes with Foundation Directory and some of these larger databases, you're going to get a lot of output that you're going to have to search through. And so let's say you get 500 results. You're like, ooh, they're not all good. So you're going to have to tease through them, and the librarians won't know. They'll use keywords, right? And then you'll get this great report, and then you'll be like, well, that one's not right, and that one's closed, and this one's not open, and what is this? So if you do that with a librarian, make sure you have the great search terms to help you really narrow down what you're looking for. Do not go in there and think the librarian's going to read your mind and come up with the greatest search, because your search is only going to be as good as the input data that you provide. So be very specific. And then you might have to go to that computer a few times to narrow down, because grants aren't always open. And even if they look good, they might not always be good. So again, with your treasure map, we've got a few holes in the map, so we might have to fill that in a little bit.
I'm Shannon. I'm with the South King Tool Library, and I was just wondering about when you look at that one that was, what, $162 a month? Why is that any better than the other ones? Or is it better? What, are there more grants there?
So why is that worth my time, my money, right? So for folks that have that money to spare, why do we like Instrumental? So CPIN, we are a professional services company. We have, I think, 3, maybe 4 subscription databases, because they're not all created equal. So what we like about Instrumental is mostly geared for nonprofits, individual researchers, right? It's not good for small businesses. Don't get it for that. But when we search in Instrumental, we're able to create a profile. So we're able to create a dedicated search profile with key terms. We have very accurate information in one spot. And what they put in their database is they put the 990 in there. So what's a 990? Why is she talking about these numbers? The 990 is a tax return for the organizations the funders giving money. And you're able to look at that 990 and see when the last time that organization gave money. You're able to see how much money that organization has in the bank that they claimed on their tax reform and how much they've given out. And you're able to see it by geography. So if you're doing something in Washington State and you find a great funder, but they haven't given money out for 5 years and they have an open grant, is that the best opportunity? And you're able to see who they funded before, right? So when you want to know, are they going to fund an organization like me? You can see their funding history. You can download it. You can export it. You can just stay up at night and be like, I can't wait to apply for this grant. So this is why we have a subscription database to Instrumental as grant writers, because it makes our job easier, and it knows that when we're going to throw that dart at the dartboard, we're going to hit the target, right? So this is why having a dedicated resource will help save you time. Now, Foundation Directory and some of these other searches, they might have this information, but it's not combined together and it's not easy to follow. So it kind of makes you have to do a lot of legwork.
One of the nice things about Instrumental, one of the reasons we like to use it is tracking. So every grant that I apply for any client, I mark that it's been applied, or it's been received, or it's been declined. So it's really good for us for collecting data. That feature of the 990s is really nice to look at too. So I tend to do that when I'm deciding if I want to do a grant for a client, look and see who they funded in the past, things like that. I do think that the Grant Watch also has access to the Foundation 990 reports. It's not as robust as Instrumental, but if you are working with a lower budget, that is something to check out. I think it's not quite as intuitive as Instrumental is, but those 990s are in Grant Watch. Instrumental really just breaks it down a lot by putting it into graphs and charts and making it really easy to read. But if you don't have the budget for that, I think you can still find similar information in Grant Watch. You might just have to dig around a little bit more to see it, but the 990s are in there. So that's something to think about too.
And I think both of these systems offer like a try it before you buy it option. And so you might just try to see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, then don't buy into it, because it has to be something you use. And if you're not using it, then it's probably not worth the investment. So
in theory, if let's say that Instrumental, okay, it's the creme de la creme. Why couldn't 2 or 3 people or nonprofits go together on one thing and save some money?
Idea.
True. Yeah, join forces. I love that.
Yeah, we've upgraded our subscription, so you don't want to know how much we pay per year. But when we were at the first tier, which is what we're showing you, we were able to get 10 projects. So 10 individual projects with keywords and associated funding opportunities. But those 10 projects could change. They could be whatever. So if you want to be able to track opportunities and just use it as more of a research tool, that's great. If you want to start, attaching funded grants to it, that's when you'll use up those 10 projects pretty quickly. But I think it's a great investment. We even see some mid to larger size organizations using Google, and it makes us kind of like shudder because we're like, oh, that's such a better use of your time. Even if you get an intern or a volunteer, if they can't find the best opportunity for you to apply for, you're just wasting time. You're not saving time. So we use it as a time saver because we can go in and find a report in about a half hour of potential funding opportunities for ourselves or clients, and then we're like, oh, these are pretty good. So that's why we think it's worth the investment, even if you can just start with a few nonprofits going in together.
What is the range of payment? How much usually grant writer charge?
About paying the grant writer. Okay, so in an ethical way to work with a grant writer is to not pay them if the grant is funded. So grants are usually, when they fund you forward, they don't usually fund any cost in preparing that grant because that's in the past, right? The future is the money and the program you're going to do. So if they say, I'll write a grant for a percentage of the award, I'll take 10% of your $1 million. You can't give them that once you're funded, right? So I say grant writers tend to get paid by project, by the hour, and it depends on what you're looking for. So like foundation funded grants are a lot easier to write. They're more storytelling. If you're looking at state or federal opportunities, those are harder, and more competitive. So you have to be ready to get those grants, and it takes a lot to get ready. So I think I'll let Ariana talk about like her experience in freelancing.
Yeah, so thanks, Angela. I think that one thing you could check out, there's a couple of different websites. I did freelance grant writing before I joined CPEN. There's a website called Upwork, just UPWORK, and it is an online marketplace of freelance folks who do a variety of things from website design and coding to advertising to grant writing. And that might be a good place to start. Also, for some of you who said you're looking for grant writers, you can probably find some grant writers who are newer on there who might be charging less, which might be a bit of a gamble because they don't have as much experience, but you will see a range of prices so you can find things to fit your budget. I think it's really hard to give a range of what grant writers charge because there is such a variety. And again, like Angela said, it's going to depend. Is it a foundation grant? Is it a state grant? Is it a federal grant? How much experience does that grant writer have? So I say look at Upwork and just type in for the category, just put in grant writer and see what comes up, get kind of a feel for the folks who are available and the price range. But yeah, it is typical usually to charge by hour, I think, maybe sometimes by project. But yeah, as Angela said, it's definitely not possible. Things that you can get your grant to pay for would be the support afterwards. So doing compliance, reporting, that kind of stuff you can build in, but it's really not typical to be able to build in the grant writing cost. So unfortunately.
And just one comment on that in this day of AI. So AI will write a grant for you, but AI is not good at answering the grant questions. It's good at putting words out, right? And so what we have seen is people try to get a lot of grants out the door by using ChatGPT or whatever AI tool they're using. And when we read some of their writing, we're like, what did you answer this question? What is all this wonderful language that makes no sense? So if you're going to use AI, I would use it maybe as a spell check or a formatter, right? But I wouldn't use it to write your grant because it's not going to save any time, because when the funder reviews your grant, they're going to be like, what? So again, that may be a time saver, but you might want to use a combination of tools. And sometimes grants have rolling deadlines. So the best way to write a grant is to take your time and answer the questions. Just like we were in school when they made us write a paper, like we need a paper about 1888 on Monday. And you're like, huh? It's Friday, right? So you have to go and do your research, figure out what happened in 1888 and come up with 13 pages by Monday. Same thing about grants. They want to know who you are, what your story is, like that need statement we talked about, and what you're going to do, how much money you need, and what you're going to do with it. So if you can answer those questions and take your time, and what we're doing here, we're providing grant writing guidance, but you can bring us your grant idea, your grant opportunity. Challenge me, I would love it. And we can give you some guidance from our perspective on how you can make that more competitive, even with the decades of experience I have in grant writing, I still go to workshops to say, okay, here's my grant. Is it going to get funded? Right? Because you can always learn.
So Melody has asked if there's a vetting process on the Upwork site. And there is not necessarily a vetting process. People can be verified, as in ensure that they're real people. So their email addresses, their phone numbers, things like that are checked. And the person will upload their resume, all of their experience. And so you can check that out. And it works kind of like Airbnb or Uber or something like that, where when someone has worked with a freelancer, they leave reviews, and so then you can read the feedback. So the more work someone has gotten, the more you can read the reviews, and just like you're picking an Airbnb or something, essentially. So yes, or Amazon. Yeah, so it works on that kind of peer review model. Did you have a comment back there?
Yeah, it's generally you just allow them to create a proposal. They can give you a percentage of what they want to be paid or how they want to be paid, project or by hourly. And on their profile, they'll have what they want per hour, what they want per project, and then you can set up an interview through that process and allow you to actually go through and vet them a little bit more.
Cool. Thank you. All right. This is great. I love all of this interaction today. Let us move to the next slide here. Okay, so we just did all of these paid treasure maps that you can look at. There's also some free ones, so this is exciting. These are ones you don't have to pay for at all. So there is grants.gov. If you are looking for federal grants, grants.gov is where you are going to go. It is not necessarily pretty or user-friendly or anything like that, but it is the repository for federal grants, and anything that is being given by the US government is going to show up on grants.gov. Locally, you definitely want to be checking out the Washington Department of Commerce. We love the Department of Commerce. They're great. We have applied for so many grants from them for so many different clients. They always have open grant opportunities. And if you go to their website, you can also sign up to receive alerts. So that way you don't have to keep looking. Just go to the website once, put your email address in, and then you will just start getting their digest of emails. And they're gonna have opportunities for a variety of folks. So they'll sometimes have grants for small businesses or nonprofits or all kinds of different entities. So definitely get familiar with the Department of Commerce. And there's also the US Small Business Administration. They sometimes offer grants. Again, I believe there's a newsletter you can sign up with them so you can be notified of opportunities. Another really good one to be aware of is the Washington's Electronic Business Solution, which is called WEBS. So this is one where you have to go and you have to register and create a profile for your business, create a login. And so this is going to be slightly different from grants, but I think it's important that we talk about this too. This is more procurement for contracts. Angela, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
So in the web system, the registration isn't hard. You will sign up. They'll ask you who you are, what you do. You'll have to enter like your work by commodity code. So they'll give you some hints of like what your code is. And then you can also set this for things that you want to see by work by county. And you can also search across Washington state. So you'll see counties, you'll see cities, you'll see universities. Anybody that wants to do business with somebody is going to have something in WEBS. So like the Department of Forestry might be planting trees. Who's going to be our tree planter? We've seen folks that the apple growers wanting website design, right? Folks, also you'll see some grants, like the Department of Health might be saying we want a lot of sites to help us with this health money, this mental health money. So WEBS is great. You'll get alerts if it matches your profile, but it's also a good search tool. And I love the examples that Ariana put on here because, again, you're thinking goods and services. And sometimes it could be a grant or it could be a contract that you're bidding on, janitorial services, right? I want to do janitorial services at the University of Washington. Or we've also seen like everybody needs HVAC repair, HVAC inspection, like if you're HVAC, I'm going to go talk to them, right? Usually in that case, when you're offering services, they're looking for the lowest bidder, right? So that you're like, oh, okay. So probably a lot of work, and you have to come in a pretty competitive bid because the amount that you request is scored, and usually the lowest bidder gets a great score. For grants, we've seen a lot come through here. Last week I talked about the Community Reinvestment Act for businesses that are BIPOC, Latine, tribal, etc. There's funds for small businesses and for nonprofits in there. So examples, if you can't see that, like Big Bend College is looking for a vendor for campus food services, right? That's cool. Hopefully you're watching that if you do that and put in your bid. DSHS is looking for a sign language interpreter, right? Wow, who knew? And then Washington State University is looking for window cleaners. So again, these are some mostly service opportunities, but you'll find that, and this is a great way and an easy and a free way to search. And we get alerts, but we also actively search on behalf of our clients.
Awesome. Thanks, Angela. Sure. All right. See, we've got one more free treasure map. So this one is called Fund Hub Washington. So this is, again, going to be opportunities for all entity types, businesses, nonprofit, and others. So this is specifically going to be grants that are all related to climate resilience in some way. But a way to think about grants is sometimes you have to think about different angles and how can you find an angle for what you need. So for example, if you have a building that you are working from and maybe you need some new windows or a new air conditioning or something like that, this might be a place to look because you can look for things like there will be grants for buildings and infrastructure, energy efficiency, workforce development, grants for rural areas. Those are all categories that I pulled from the category selection here. So just something to think about. Sometimes you got to think about different angles for grants. So if you need some windows, you might need an energy efficiency grant. And so this is a great website where every grant related to these topics within Washington is going to be here. And again, it's free. Again, you can set alerts. And I think I have this in a later slide, but I do want to drive home this point. Just make things as easy for yourself as possible. Anytime you can set an alert, anytime you can have opportunities emailed to you, it might take a little bit more work on the front end to set up and say, these are the categories that I'm interested in, these are all my keywords. But then it will really make things easier because you're just gonna start getting emails and one day you're gonna be like, oh, this is the perfect grant. And it just popped into your inbox and you'll be really grateful for your past self who took those couple of moments to sign up for these. So I think that would be a great takeaway, if folks just go home and sign up for some of these and start getting some grants into your inbox can be really helpful. And then also we're curious about where you've searched for grants in the past. So this should be the same QR code that's on your table. I know some of you are newer for grants, so no worries if you don't have anything to add, but if you have used any databases in the past, we'd love to see your responses. And after this, we're going to move on to our next section where we're going to give you all some tips for how to find all these wonderful grants.
Google is going to be like president.
Yes. All right, so far we've got Google.
We love acronyms. So SAMHSA does a lot of mental health work. The Healthcare Authority is HCA. Small Business Admin, good. And the Fund WA one we saw on the previous slide is a new initiative. The governor's real excited. Washington State is a leader in energy efficiency, so we're excited to see new tools to find resources for energy efficiency.
FDO is the Foundation Directory Online. So that was one of the ones that was on a previous slide. We didn't talk about it too much, but it was there on the bottom. All right, awesome. Thank you all for sharing your responses.
Awesome. Oh, we're getting some more here.
Good. ChatGPT, that's interesting. Okay.
ChatGPT for grant searching, like an AI tool.
Mm-hmm. King County.
Grant Hub, okay. This is so cool. We've got a lot of diversity there. Okay, foundation websites, large foundation websites.
Yes, and that is, I think I had a slide on that once and then I took it out. You can also, another option you might know about some funders who are local, maybe the Murdoch Foundation, the Gates Foundation, right? There are some really big name foundations in Washington, and you can always go to their websites directly. I took that slide out because I think it's more time consuming because again, you're bopping around, going from website to website, whereas if you're using a database, all those are going to be in one place. But that is also a way that you can go about it. If you know of some foundations in Washington, you can certainly go directly to their sites. Tribes are another. So in this area, maybe Muckleshoot or others. Most of the tribes, especially that have casinos, they give away a certain amount of the gaming profits. So if you know what tribes are in your area, you can also check their websites. Again, those grants are probably going to pop up in the larger databases, but you can also go directly there. All right. Okay, we are ready for section 2. So now we've got our treasure maps, and now we're going to decode the clues. Let's talk about eligibility criteria. We've touched on this a little bit, but I think it's important to go into more detail. So as Angela has said earlier, even though you get these great list of grants from your treasure map, you still have to go through them because every grant is different and every grant is going to have specific eligibility requirements. These could be the area, the geographic area. These could be the population served. There could be restrictions on your nonprofit budget. Some grants might only want to fund larger nonprofits, whereas other grants might only want to fund smaller nonprofits. So this is why I like to think of this as get your magnifying glass and be looking for your clues, because the worst thing would be to put a bunch of time into writing a grant and then basically be told you weren't eligible. So this step is really, really important to just ensure that you are actually eligible for the grant that you are applying for. And of course, the entity type, so whether you're a nonprofit or a small business, that makes a big difference as well. So you definitely want to look for that. And then your second clue is going to be priority alignment. So this is super important. So you want to make sure that the project you're proposing is something that the funder is going to want to fund. Because if it's not, your grant application may not even be looked at. For example, maybe a funder really just wants to fund animal welfare, but you've submitted an application for serving homeless populations. They're just going to throw out the grant. So you have to make sure that you are in line with the funder's priorities. So depending on the grant database that you're using, you may be able to see some of the funder's priorities right in the database. For example, an instrumental, it's going to give you a lot of information, give you the list of the priorities. But even if your grant database doesn't do that, what you can do is just go to the funder's website. So most funders are going to have lots of information on their website because they actually don't want to get applications that are misaligned either, because it also takes their time and resources to even look at them and realize they're not eligible. So they really want you to submit applications that are in line with their priorities. So this is super important. You really want to make sure you dig in and see what are the big picture priorities. So sometimes they may have categories, for example, food security, homelessness, mental health, things like that. So there may be big picture. And then another thing you can do too is check their websites and look at some of the grants that they've given in the past. What are some of the projects that they've funded? And this is a lot of research, but it really does help, because otherwise it's kind of just like throwing spaghetti at a wall, right? You may just not be hitting the priorities that the funder has. So I really want to stress this a lot, that it's really important to make sure that the grants you are going for are really well aligned with what that funder wants to fund. Okay, so another clue you can look for is financial requirements. So some grants may want you to have an audit, which many smaller nonprofits may not have. And so unfortunately, you can't apply for those. So that's one thing to look for. Also, some grants are going to require a match. So what that means is they might say, we're going to give you $100,000, but you have to have 25% to put towards it. And so that can unfortunately be really prohibitive sometimes for organizations because you might not have that match. So you definitely want to look at that ahead of time and just make sure. And then make sure that there are any kind of financial prerequisites you can meet. And I'm just realizing I already talked about clue number 4, to analyze past funded projects, so I'll just mention that again. So that's another clue that you can use. Angela, anything you want to add there?
So funders, if they're nonprofits, will have an annual report, so check that out. You can also look at their 990. So anyone that gives money that's a charitable organization or gets money as a charitable organization should be filing a 990. And sometimes they'll detail out how much money they gave to other organizations. And one thing we haven't included in tonight's slides, so a little tidbit for you, you can also find some national funders that will support your cause, right? And so they're not limited to geography for Washington State, but they really care about the issue you're trying to address. So it's okay to kind of broaden your scope of like who will fund the work you want to do.
Okay, so we've got some more clues. So clue number 5, you want to evaluate your timeline and the deadlines. So this is really important as well. So sometimes, unfortunately, you may find the perfect grant, but it may be due tomorrow, and you may not have the capacity to complete it by that time. But something that I would really advise you to do is to create a sort of grants calendar for yourself or whatever works for you. So maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet or a document, just a Word doc, notes on your phone, whatever it is, but keep track of grants because typically most grants are going to recur. Maybe they're on an annual application cycle. The COVID grants were a bit different because that was a specific pot of money for a specific time, but if you are looking for especially foundation grants, those are usually open. There will be multiple application cycles. Maybe there's 2 deadlines per year, or a lot of times there might be 4 deadlines per year because a lot of foundations, their boards will review the grant applications, and typically they might review these quarterly. So you might find, okay, this deadline is tomorrow, but there's another deadline in 3 months. So you want to think about that. So don't panic if the deadline is tomorrow. It's probably better not to try to submit it, but to put it on your calendar, set yourself an alert, and then go for it in 3 months. And the other thing you want to think about is the timeline. So depending on the need that you're trying to fulfill, so maybe you have something really urgent that's happening. Maybe at your childcare facility, something is unsafe and it's a hazard for the kids, and it's really important to get it fixed as soon as possible. But you might find that the grant wouldn't come through for an entire year. A lot of times on websites, funders will tell you, they'll give you a sense of what the application cycle and process is like. So they'll say, this is the deadline, this is the period we're reviewing the grants, and then this is the date at which decisions will be made, and then money will be dispersed on this date. So there's this whole process. And so you want to look at that too and think about whether or not, can I wait a year to get this money if it's going to take that long? Or will I still have this need in a year? And other grants are on a shorter timeline. So if you have a really urgent need, you might want to look for other grants that are a bit of a shorter timeline. So that's something to keep in mind too as you've got your magnifying glass and you're really looking over these clues. So our next clue, you want to look at all of your required documents. So there's a couple parts of grant applications. Obviously, the big part is actually writing the grant, the narrative portions. That tends to be the biggest struggle, but there's also a lot of paperwork that goes along with grants as well. We went over this a little bit last week. If you were here, we talked about how to prepare for a grant, and we talked about all the different paperwork you might need. Maybe your list of board members or your staff members, or if you're a nonprofit, your verification letter from the IRS, or if you're a small business, maybe some of your vendor numbers and things like that. So you want to make sure that you can have all of those required documents and that you can have them in time for the grant deadline, because what you don't want to do is write the whole grant but then realize that there is an annual report that's required, but you're not going to have that until after the deadline. So just keep an eye on all of the paperwork that's going to be required. And I know it seems like a lot, but the more you get into this and the more you do this, the more second nature it will start to become, and it won't take as long as you think. We've got a question over here.
They did. When you were just talking about documents, if you don't have your current documents, should you send the last year's, or is that sloppy?
I think that in many cases, the last year's would be fine. Sometimes if it has to be the current year, it would specify that. It might say, 2024 is required. But sometimes, especially with tax returns and things like that, folks might get extensions from the IRS, and so maybe they are a year behind. So I think what you have is, what you can submit. Really what you just want to do is make sure you're looking over things with your magnifying glass and making sure that it doesn't specifically say you can't send in last year's form. And usually there's a contact you can email or call and ask questions, so it might be good to check that out as well. So just think of yourself like a detective, and also remember that every grant is going to be different. So if one grant said no, another grant might be totally fine with it. Okay, so let's move on to our final question, or our final section. So now X marks the spot. So we have had our treasure maps, we have looked at all of our clues, we've had our magnifying glasses out, and so now we are here. We're at the X on the treasure map, where you are pretty sure that you found the grant that is going to be right for you. So these are some tips for how you get to that point of finding that X marks the spot. Some of these we have talked about a little bit, but I'll go over them again. So my number one tip here is make sure you're setting up alerts. And so this is similar to what I was saying with when you're registering with WEBS or grants.gov or Washington Department of Commerce, so that they can send you an email list. You can also do this in any of the grant search databases. So if you're using GrantWatch, which is the one that we highlighted, or any of the other grant databases, you can let it know what you want to receive in your email. You can say, I want to know about grants in this category, and it will email them to you. So again, this is trying to just help you save time and let opportunities come to you rather than you always having to constantly be looking. So use those tools, set up those alerts, and let grants come to you. Again, keeping a grant deadline calendar. So we've touched on this, but to reiterate, you want to make sure that you are staying organized and keeping track of deadlines. So as we mentioned, if you come across a grant that is too soon of a deadline, mark that down so that you can go back and do it again. Also, if you do find that perfect X marks the spot grant, make sure you're also setting yourself up for success with that. So make sure that you are knowing when that deadline is, know what time that deadline is. Another interesting thing about grants is that sometimes they're due at 2 p.m. Sometimes they're due at 5 p.m. Sometimes they're due at 11:59 p.m. And it is hard to say what the rhyme or reason to that is, but you're going to see all kinds of different times. So even if you know it's due on October 3rd, if you think it's due at 5, but it's actually due at 2, you might miss that deadline, and that would really be a bummer. And one thing to keep in mind too is that there's really not much flexibility with submitting grants. If you are 1 minute past the deadline, you can't submit the grant. It's harsh. So it's really something to keep in mind. Set yourself a million reminders, alarms, whatever it is that you need to do, just to make sure that you don't miss that even by a minute, because then all your hard work could be in vain. This one, diversify your funding sources. You probably can't see this super well, but it's kind of a graphic of little eggs in a basket. So the idea here, don't put all your eggs into one basket, right? So there's a couple ways to apply this. So you want to look at grants from a variety of sources. So don't just look at foundation grants, or don't just look at grants from the Department of Commerce. You want to look at grants from all of the different types of funders that are available and attempt to apply for different kinds of grants. And also consider using different databases. And this might be something that you work up to as your organization grows or has more financial capacity. But there are going to be different grants in each database. All of the databases that we talked about earlier, there will be some grants that are in all of them, but each one is also going to have unique grants that aren't in any of the other ones. So if you find that you are only using one, maybe team up with a friend, right? I love this idea of teamwork. You know, maybe one organization has instrumental, but the other organization has a grant watch, and maybe one day you get together and you co-work and you swap and you look at the other database, because there will be different ones. And sometimes what you'll see too is that there are smaller foundations that will reach out to, I just saw this the other day, an instrumental. There's a foundation, they don't have a website, they don't have any kind of web presence, but they specifically reached out to instrumental and said, hey, we want our grant to be included here. And so I don't think that grant exists anywhere other than on instrumental, because that foundation reached out and said, hey, we want to be here. And other websites or other databases may have that same thing. Okay. I think that's actually all the slides I have, which is great timing. I think we've got about, oh my gosh, there are more slides. There's a whole nother section. Yes. Okay, we might skip this question because I think we're running out of time. And I did forget that we had another section. Okay, so here, this you guys can look at. I think probably when we email you the slides will be easier, because we put all these QR codes. So these are some sample grant proposals. It can be really helpful to look at some samples and see what grant proposals look like. So when we email these out, these QR codes will be easier to use. So there's several different sites where you can go and look at proposals that were funded. So those can be great to read over and see what those are like. All right, Angela, I turn it over to you for this.
Yes, and we wanted to give you some, because once you find one, then you're going to have that writer's block, okay, how do I get there? So let us know if you need more resources. So this is in response to some of the questions or things I brought up last week. So we wanted to do a funder spotlight. VMFH, we live in acronyms in the grant writing world. This is Virginia Mason Franciscan Health. So I wanted to point out a few different areas, and you can find this website as well. They provide mission-based initiative grants. This is usually a one-year competitive opportunity that comes up annually. Grants are usually $20,000 to $100,000, and they require partnerships. So currently, under this type of grant, they'll want to have a lead applicant and 2 other partners. So to Cheryl's point, or other folks' should I work with others? Yes. Community health improvement grants. These are smaller, but you'll be able to click in and see if it fits the work that you want to do to improve the community, and if it aligns with Virginia Mason's work that they want to do. Corporate sponsorship. So we haven't highlighted that a lot, but some organizations will sponsor an upcoming event. And these are typically probably smaller, like $5,000 or less, but I would check that out. These are open at different times. So track the deadlines, as Ariana said, and we included a QR code in the slides that'll be sent out, so you can easily find it if you can't use the power of Google. All right. More. Yay! Okay, who gives grants? Verizon. If you may or may not have a Verizon plan, but they love to give small business grants. So our next series will probably highlight mostly small business grants, but you can sign up for Small Business Digital Ready. They will also want to give you some resources. So in the sign-up process, they'll ask you what you need help in. You'll check some boxes. They'll offer you some free trainings. After you've taken a few free classes, then the opportunity for the grant will open up, and they usually give out about $10,000 at least annually. So this is a good one to check out. As you sign up, you'll be able to see like who they've funded before in this work. Comcast Rise. Okay, this is Comcast program. So you're, digital home internet provider or TV provider. So they provide free training and grants to small businesses. They also sometimes give computers or tech support. So I would check them out. Same thing, sign up process and see what resources they might have for you. And they'll also give you examples of funded projects.
And don't worry, folks, there's plenty of nonprofit grants out there too. We put a lot of these in because last week when we did this, there were primarily small businesses. So we put more small business grants in, but don't worry, nonprofits, you have many grants available out there.
Yes. All right, so Women's Net. So this is for women's owned businesses. They might also fund women-led nonprofits. They usually fund quarterly, and then one time a year, I think they'll give out a $25,000 grant. Super simple application. They accept grants every month. So please check them out if you're a women-led business or cause, and they'll ask you to tell your story, and you might win some money. Okay, resources. So there's some money stuff. Now, how do you go get it, or how do you help your business? So last week we talked about PTAC sites. This is Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. This link here, this QR code, is for the APTAC, so the Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers. Wow. That's an acronym. So you can search this site. We searched here by Washington. There are several resources. So one of the larger ones is the Washington State Apex Accelerator, and they'll tell you what counties they serve. Green River College also serves Pierce and King counties. The American Indian Chamber Education Fund. Wow, right? So if you're a small business, you want to know who can provide you support as far as like how to expand your business or how to go after competitive procurements, check these guys out. All right, SCORE. Look at these women. They're all like, yeah, SCORE. So they're looking sassy. So SCORE, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but they offer free business support. And so when CPIN was starting, I reached out to SCORE and got assigned, I think his name was David. And I said, David, how do I make this all happen? And he gave me his advice. David was a retired banker and had a lot of good success. So he said, this is what I would do in those situations. So it's like a personal mentor. And then they will help guide you through questions for your nonprofit or small business. Yes?
The business supposed to pay taxes or not? Because sometimes you get taxes in December and you want to spend next year. How it works with paying taxes?
Yes, good question. So what is grant money when it comes in? So no matter your business type, a small nonprofit or a small business, grants are considered revenue. Right? Dollars coming in. So you would work with, if you do your own taxes, you would report it as income for your business, whether you spent it or not, if they just give you a check. If you get a grant award letter that says you have up to $10,000 to spend, but you get to invoice us as you spend your own money and we'll give you money back, then that would be a little bit more delayed in how you claim that revenue and expense. All right. More small business stuff. We're excited. Okay, this is Small Business Accelerator. So this is specific to King County, and they have a lot of resources, including grants and programs. So if you want to know what money is happening locally, or like what King County wants to do with businesses, they have their own procurement area. You can see what it's like to do business with King County. So check this out. All right. Here in Tacoma, I love this slide because we're calling out Frank Boykin. So he is the project director for the Minority Business Development Agency. And why is this important to know? Well, the state office is in Tacoma. So if you want to go south a little bit, his phone number is there too. Make an appointment with Frank. So the Minority Business Center is going to be able to set up an appointment with you and tell you everything that you need to know for grants or resources for your small business. If you're a minority-led business, a business led by a woman, a business that's disadvantaged or lower income or serving those populations, this is a great resource.
Thank you, Angela. Thanks, everybody. Well, we are grateful for you being here and doing our presentation. What questions do you have? Feel free to ask us anything. Yes, we've got a question back here.
You receive grants of any kind, whether it's at $50 or more, don't ever forget to say thank you. But it would be kind of fun to find out creative ways of doing it. I know a lot of them myself, but if you're going to address that, I'd like to be in that session too.
Yeah, I say saying thank you is very important. And kind of broader than that, so getting grants is all about relationships, right? So if you are working to try to get a local foundation's money, or maybe the local Walmart, did you know like the Kia dealer gives money, the Ford dealer gives money, right? Your car salesman. It's all about who you know. And so you've got to think that this is small town America and you want to get to know everybody because you don't know what resources they can provide you. And they can provide you money, time, etc. So say thank you. Now, some funders may require you to say thank you with a report of how you use the money, right? So that's kind of like a required thank you. But tell them what you've done. Reach out. Tell them how you've helped the people you helped with the money. Tell them, give them pictures, give them stories. If you serve a certain population, like we talked about women and wellness, introduce them to some women that have benefited from your program. There is nothing more important than being able to connect with somebody emotionally, and they will feel like if you're feeding people and you say, you know what, we've had hungry bellies all week. This is the first hot meal this kid has had all week. That touches a nerve. We all know what it's like to be hungry, right? And we all know what it's like to have a good meal. So say thank you, even if you're not asked, because you don't know when you'll get the next dollar. And sometimes funders, we've seen this as well, out of the blue will write you a check because they love the work you're doing and they love the stories you're telling. So thank you for that.
I love this idea. We really could do a whole workshop on that. And I think what Angela was saying is a great idea. I feel like one of the best ways to say thank you is to show the impact that you're having, you know, say, hey, with this money that you gave us, this is what we've done. These are the number of people that have been helped. Because I think ultimately, at the end of the day, these funders want to help. And so when you show that they have helped, I think that goes a long way. Other questions? Okay.
We'll be here to answer questions one-on-one. And next week, what are we learning, Ariana?
Yes. Okay. So next week we'll be here, same place, same time, Thursday, 6 to 7:30, and we're going to be talking about navigating post-grant success. So actually, that could be a place where we could talk about saying thank you. So yeah, we'll be talking about things like that, as well as more formal things like reporting and complying with the grant requirements, all of that. So I hope to see you all back again next week.